back to the Lozcast. Good to have you guys. This is a new feed that we're putting up on the Lawrence McKenna football channel. And joining me for this first feed is Jamie Slevin. Jamie, it's good to have you.
Lawrence, great to be here, mate.
Thank you very much for coming along. We do a podcast weekly that does have its own feed on the Lozcast on Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcast, and now on YouTube as well. But we thought we kind of take it visual just because setting up cameras and doing it for 3 hours in order to record a 1 hour podcast makes sense. This is a football podcast. In its infancy. Let's talk then about why I might have messed that all up with my preseason predictions.
I hear that you're a man with regrets today, Lawrence.
Well, you know what? Like I've done preseason predictions year on year on year, and every year something is inevitably wrong because, well, like how are you meant to predict that someone changes their manager halfway through the season, that someone buys a striker at the end of the transfer window, all these kind of things? You can try, but ultimately, there is always going to be a bit of, why did I not see that coming? And weirdly, like you become a better predictor as you go, but partially just by minimizing or mitigating risk rather than actually, doing the predicting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and there's this interesting question, which is, do you look at the sides and how they're shaping up? Or do you just use football logic? So football logic in this instance might be, well, Chelsea are obviously going to finish third because Chelsea always have a gap year and finish third.
Yeah, right. And Liverpool also have a fallow year and then finish higher. Or City have a bad year and then go on and storm the league for the next 2 years.
Right, and the question is whether you're looking at those variables or like, oh wow, Kovacic comes in and City play a pivot too.
Well, so how do you want to address my regrets? I put a video out. It was fairly popular for a small channel. It's done like half the amount of subs, so it's pretty good. But predictions this time of the season tend to do pretty well. How would you start? Would you start at the bottom? Should we start at the bottom?
I think we should probably start at the bottom.
Okay. I put Luton. I put Sheffield. I put Southampton. I put Sheffield, and I put Wolves. Wolves we can discuss. Luton seemed like an open and shut case to me. They have a classic ground. I think some people may overestimate some of their elements where it's like, you go there and, it's a tricky game, blah, blah, blah. But really, that's just the eye test. The actual test of numbers doesn't really follow that. And it's Luton. Like, they are a club that I think is aspiring, but ultimately a lot of clubs are going to go there, batten down the hatches, get through the game, and try and get out with 3 points. And most of the time, I think you can see people controlling those games because Luton also very direct, right?
Yeah, Luton have sort of two issues. The first is their away form.
Right.
Teams like Luton, Blackpool had the exact same thing. Sheffield United had the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. You come up to the Premier League and it's just really hard to generate your style of play and impose yourself away from home.
Yeah.
Their other issue is because it's Kenilworth Road and more so than any other previous Premier League ground, it's, good luck going there.
Right.
Teams are going to go ready for a fight. Mm. And, we were speaking off air earlier about Liverpool going there. If you play long ball against Liverpool, you have the Dutch captain at centre-half, and the problem is you don't see the ball again for 10 minutes.
Play long ball against City, the same. Play long ball against Arsenal. Arsenal may give it back because actually Arsenal like to give it back and then win it back at the moment, or they seem to be going that way, but you won't have it for long.
The really interesting thing about Luton is whether they still go as direct, because anyone who was watching the Championship playoff final would have been quite surprised, and it was very satisfying seeing a team play such a different way. Mm-hmm. But Nathan Jones took over Southampton, and he was unbelievably direct. In fact, in charge of Luton, mm-hmm. and the football didn't work at all. He looked totally out of his depth.
Can you vary directness? So, for instance, like Sean Dyche did it in his first game against Arsenal, I think it was, where he went direct, but not down the middle, just direct into the channels, and that seemed to like slice them open.
Yeah, so Luton Town, that's essentially exactly right. They mix it up. So there's two methods really of playing.
Yeah.
You have the fullbacks playing diagonals to the centre forwards, and this is the Nathan Jones innovation. I say innovation. Midfield players close to the centre forwards. Now, Luton...
For the knockdowns.
And I say it again, because I didn't watch a huge amount of Luton last year, I confess.
Even Luton fans.
But in the Championship playoff final, it was so cool to freeze frame it and go, there's a centre forward 5 yards off him. Right. There's a midfield player 5 yards off him.
Right.
So that's method one. But method two is going down the line. And the one question you have, and I think it's a question that they'll answer, but the one question you have is, will centre halves from the continent, sorry to sound like every...
I get it.
Yeah. how will they find playing against two centre forwards and a midfield player? And I think they'll be okay. But that is the one danger.
Okay, so, but yeah, and I think Luton have a lot of dangers. I also just think ultimately when you get to the Premier League, and it's similar when you take a step up to the Champions League, the depth in the dearth in quality and the depth in the Premier League is so much so that you just find yourself wanting towards the end of the season. Bournemouth had to bridge that gap tactically in some way, and they were found wanting with Scott Parker, but then turn that around. I think you can turn it around, and maybe you'll have like an innovation that you possibly, capitalize on. But in the long run, I think supremacy at the top is kind of tricky. And the problem for Luton might be there are just too many quality sides in the league and sides with more quality, should we say.
Yeah, and we should talk about this because the league, as far as I can tell, has the big six.
Yep.
Newcastle United, Aston Villa and Brighton.
That's like a big... It's becoming a large nine.
Yeah, it's becoming a bloated nine.
Are Brighton a big... I think like Brighton are like an aspiring bit. They're like a middleweight.
Brighton have a claim to big, but it's hard because they've got European football.
Do you know, I think, again, the bridging of the gap is the tactics. It's De Zerbi. He is tactically fantastic. And I guess their infrastructure has also gotten them there over time, right? With Graham Potter and those kind of people. But what I'm really saying is both those managers have been empowered to perform above what you would expect from those teams because of probably tactical and maybe some kind of scouting innovation.
But it is interesting because tactics and tactical innovation gets you ahead for 6 months. I mean, Antonio Conte found this. He played 3 at the back and won 15 games on the spin. And then they played the FA Cup final against Arsenal, who played 3 at the back.
No, I totally get what you're saying.
And the impressive thing about De Zerbi and Brighton and all these teams that punch above their weight is that you can't innovate once. You've got to be innovating fairly regularly.
And that's what I think with De Zerbi is quite interesting, is I think managers are conscious of this now. Like they know that when they innovate, then they have to have stages to it. Arteta was very clear about the 5 phases to the club. I think he's been innovative tactically in a sense. I think you can be innovative tactically, A, by shape, but B, also by who you deploy in those areas, because we're talking more this like positionless football now that I think a lot of people are kind of touting.
And that's a really nice pivot into one of your possible other regrets, which is Wolves.
Right. So Wolves with Lopetegui, I think it's just a bad vibe. Wolves maybe tactically changing things a bit and getting a manager in that maybe freshens them up. Great. I still think there is an element with the squad where I look at it and go, you've let 2 leaders go in Neves and Jimenez. Nunes, and Jimenez. Can you bridge that? I'm not sure.
It's really tricky. I mean, Wolves a few years ago decided we don't play 3 at the back anymore.
Right.
We're too good now to sit deep and absorb pressure. And since they did it hasn't worked. And with the new manager coming in, Gary O'Neill today, who, by the way, what a gig for him.
Amazing gig. Especially with what you're seeing as quite an innovative setup, right? Like kind of a lot of continental players, an iconic club. It's a bit of a stepping stone, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. Wolves kind of feels like a West Ham or a...
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think maybe even more because the owners were seen as innovative at some point. I think they're seen as more of a stepping stone than West Ham because you're seen as more open to offers at Wolves.
So you have them relegated?
Yeah, I have them relegated, yeah. It was a toss-off or a toss-up between them and Everton. Still felt like Everton, like I looked at who they'd let go, I looked at who they brought in, and I didn't feel confident. I felt that they let their best centre-back go. I still feel like they lack a true structure that's going to get them higher than 17th or 18th.
Yeah, it's like Everton have decided to buy in to this new identity of we stay up on the final day. There's been very little movement of like, hang on, we're Everton Football Club. We finish 10th.
I think that's just because the owners have got them in this kind of constant perpetual state of like, oh, what is actually happening at this club? And if you feel like the movement and change is not possible to do at that time, or you feel like there's like a thing you can't get over, sometimes it becomes very hard to break through those walls and do something that you feel is innovative. It hangs over the whole club when you have bad owners. I think that's why Manchester United is such an interesting one. We can discuss them later. Moving a little bit further up, I then had this like glut of teams, right? Which I began to regret my ordering of those. And I can tell you why, right? So I went immediately above that. Fulham, Forest, Palace, Burnley, West Ham, Brentford. And that's the next glut. Maybe Bournemouth at the top of it.
Let's chat Burnley.
So Burnley are an interesting one. Tactically, I think, having Kompany is fantastic. Maybe I'm a little overawed by Kompany, so I'm a bit like, oh, of course he's going to do good. And then they've signed a load of people where you basically go, God, you're playing Football Manager because this guy's really obscure from
the Belgian second tier.
Belgian second tier, or where did Salah play his early days in
Basel?
Yeah, like play teams like that, and you're like, you know something we don't know.
See, here's the thing about Vincent Kompany.
Yeah.
The owner of Burnley, American guy whose name I forget, was like, and I'm going to try and avoid doing the accent. Yeah, like he's like the pretty girl, and we're like the provincial boyfriends, and we just know we know he's going to leave. She's going to leave us, but we're just hoping it's not going to be for ages.
Right.
And
until university comes along, basically.
Yeah, and then she's off to Bristol, and it's like
Bristol, weirdly specific, but okay.
Yeah, right. As it turns out, I have a little bit of a concern about Burnley, which is as follows. The type of football they want to play is uber effective when you have the best side.
Right. You're going to feel a deficiency when you go up punch for punch with someone else. That's a real problem. Like they might be able to suck a few top teams in. Like I get the feeling Burnley might land, they play City on Friday, right? There's going to be some punches and everyone's going to go, ooh, rock them. And maybe with Liverpool, Liverpool have that proficiency to being suckered into these kind of slobber knockers. But outside of that, I think we're just looking at, yeah, you're right. But do they have enough teams that they can be better than? And is it like I'm looking at that list of teams? I'm like, okay, could Burnley beat West Ham? Absolutely. Could they beat Crystal Palace? Absolutely. Nottingham Forest? Sure, it might feel a bit more even, but ultimately, that's just an exciting game. Fulham, could they beat them? Could it be the same with Everton, Wolves? And ultimately then you're going, okay, I've listed enough teams that you make 30 points there. I've listed 5 home and 5 away games where you've got a chance. 6 home, 6 away games, and your job's Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because if there's an avid Premier League football fan who's been in a coma for exactly 2 years.
God, can everyone stop doing this coma thing, please? This coma thing is unbelievable. Like, oh, surely but Burnley, what happened with Burnley? They went down and then came back up? Well, surely we're a good team again then. Oh, get over it.
Essentially fair.
Right.
But you wouldn't believe the language. I mean, teams usually develop over a number of years. Whereas Vincent Kompany's come in, and this is, by the way, how relegation can be such a blessing. Mm-hmm. He's come in and said, sorry, Ashley Barnes, we're doing something different now.
Right, and he's kind of come in and basically been a bit of a messiah in terms of tactics and all these kind of things. And it's such a shift away from, obviously, the previous hegemonic style that, yeah, I get it. And maybe, well, this is what's interesting about all these big American investors at the moment. Bournemouth, Birmingham City with obviously
Tom Brady.
I mean, it's not Tom Brady. It's kind of Tom Brady's like the Jay-Z of Brooklyn. There, it's like obviously Jay-Z in Brooklyn, but with the Brooklyn Nets. These are all venture capitalists who are just basically trying to hook their big mates in, or people who are like, oh yeah, I'll take a couple of % of whatever it is, and if I make 50 mil, I'm good, or 10 mil. Like some of these guys are just they're in because it helps them promote in the States. Like Burnley have got an NFL player. But I'll just say it again. Burnley have got an NFL player who promos their team. It's like, cool. And NFL are really leaning into it. But every time I see it, I look at it and I go, what a corporate way of using your talent and the face of the franchise. So Tom Brady, whoever else it is that's pretending to be a fan of Burnley next week or pretending to be a fan of Brighton or Bournemouth or whoever, not Brighton, but Bournemouth.
Yeah, there was a really funny tweet because the American football player involved with Burnley is a big Chelsea fan.
Right.
And he sort of justified, he didn't need to justify it. No one was expecting him to be watching Burnley in the 90s.
Sure.
But he did justify it and say, look, I just watched a lot of the Ivory Coast. And Didier Drogba played for the Ivory Coast.
Right, okay.
And there was this idea of like, I can't get this image out of my head of like Benin versus Ivory Coast in a World Cup qualifier.
Yeah, right.
And he's there, arms folded.
And not only that, but somehow he's managed to find the feed that I can't.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I couldn't get that feed, bro. So I don't know what the hell you're thinking.
Before we finish this section, I have to ask you about your Premier League winners.
Yeah, sorry. So there's just I have a few more regrets. I kind of need to buzz through some of them. West Ham finishing higher than they should. I think we'll get into that at some point. I think there was this little section of them. It's the West Ham, Crystal Palace, Nottingham Forest. I think Palace might finish a little higher. West Ham might finish a little lower. Burnley might also finish a little bit lower, and Forest might climb as well. I just think Palace have got some undeniable talents, and I think they aren't reinforcing particularly well, and I don't think they're particularly innovative, but I think you can be misled by innovation over consistency, and I actually think Palace fairly consistent. Palace fairly consistently over the last 3 or 4 seasons have gone 14th to 11th. I think we're looking more at 11th than 14th this season.
Yeah, and Palace are just, they've
Eze
been there and they've done it.
Eze's just love Eze.
And Elise.
And there's loads of young players there. Above that, I kind of then got into this glut of people. The Brighton, Tottenham, and Newcastles are interesting. Newcastle were very good, very consistent last year because they consistently played a very consistent starting 11. They consistently started quality, or the best quality within the squad that fit together, right? And they consistently played tried and tested, recently innovative tactics in the Premier League. The expectation and what happened towards the end of the season was A, people started to work out some of those tactics, B, some of the players that they needed and consistently relied on got tired, and C, there was a lot of hype around it. All three of those things are going to continue this season at Newcastle, and everyone else in the league has gotten better. Newcastle were allowed a bit of a run on everyone else because Liverpool, Chelsea, Spurs were particularly poor. Now, I'm not saying therefore that, they don't finish above some of those sides, but you get what I'm saying. Like you've gone for Tonali. We can talk about control in the midfield in a minute. And not Harvey Barnes. Yeah. That's their innovation summer.
I have 2 problems with Newcastle this year. One is I think they're going to be the first victims of this new added time rule.
So that is a big one. I agree. So the added time thing, which basically says don't waste time, genius. I mean, genius, terrible, but also cool, punish them.
But the idea was Newcastle was so intense
Right.
in everything they did because the ball was only in play for 45 minutes
Right.
to 55 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But if Newcastle have to play 120-minute games because they're really slowing things down and Kieran Trippier is taking 5 minutes to take a throw in every half, they could be in some trouble. In addition to the obvious points of European football, how do you manage that without a huge amount of reinforcements?
And also, how do you, I guess from my perspective, there is a bit of a come back to earth moment if they do have a particularly bad moment in Europe where it is sort of like, oof. Like, are you, maybe they can negate that by saying, hey, we're a few years ahead of the curve here, where we didn't expect to be here and everyone else was poor. We just capitalized. But you get what I'm saying. There's always that kind of, ooh.
I have to ask.
Barcelona just beat you 3-0. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I have to ask you the question then. If we're saying, God, they've got a lot of football to play and it's going to be very intense, why have they not gone in for James Ward-Prowse?
Okay, I think let's talk James Ward-Prowse in the next section. I want to finish on this. I don't know how to place Liverpool in the league, and I don't know how to place Chelsea in the league. Liverpool still feel. Liverpool are the tasty batter that you can eat before it's cooked, right? But they don't win the best cake at the town fair. It's like they don't win the best cookies, right? So you can eat cookie batter raw, right? It's bloody lovely, but it just doesn't work as a cookie, and so it doesn't have the integrity that you need it to have. Now, I think Klopp is going to innovate, but even he's admitted in early preseason or late preseason is going to be we're going to be basically making a hold formation where we just go, yeah, we don't have a 6. And, Jones maybe plays there. They've lost 2 big leaders in the squad, and I get it, that's fine. But that's massive.
It's such a stupid analogy. I wish it didn't work so well here.
What, the cookie?
Yeah, it's exactly right.
Well, yeah, because you
It's
put
a
it in your mouth and you
transitional.
go, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and it is good because you've got Alexis McAllister, and that's kind of exciting.
And Szoboszlai is very exciting.
Yeah, and Jota's come back from injury, and maybe Nunes will come good, and there's a lot of tasty cookie dough. But you just look at the other cakes in the competition, and you go, Jesus, they're dicking around with like sprinkles and stuff. They've upgraded Party for Declan Rice. I mean, they're levels above
Anything.
shit, guys. We don't have a 6.
Yeah. They just need a 6. Liverpool need a 6, and then in the long run, a new centre-back. But the problem is, consistently now, because Liverpool are under review by everyone. They're constantly under review. So I think that also hinders them to an extent where it's like, oh, we're still under review. Oh.
Do you think Alexander-Arnold then is the key?
He's not the six. I mean, I think he's part of, and he needs to be a six. He could play at the centre of midfield, but he also then isn't covering that right-hand side enough. And Konate does look exposed. Pre-season, they've kind of played, I think, Conor Bradley out there. They played a couple of players out there. I think it's Conor Bradley. They've played a couple of players out there where they've gone, oh yeah, you could slot into right back, and that covers for Trent, and that gives him a bit more freedom. But there isn't what feels like a long-term solution has reared its head here.
What do you consider to be a good season for Liverpool?
Fourth or third or fourth.
Would fifth be a disappointment?
Yeah, because Liverpool need, it wouldn't be a disappointment for Klopp. I think it would be a disappointment for Liverpool. So
relative to expectations,
all contextual, yeah.
You think, well, fifth's probably about right. Chelsea are going to come back in a big way, I think.
I think in a huge way, yeah.
It's so Chelsea. I could talk to you about Jackson looks great or Pochettino's come in. It's none of that. I could manage Chelsea and they'd finish third this year because that is what they do.
There's also so much quality within that squad. Like there is real quality within the team. And you could sort of see it coming. It was like, if these guys get the right coach, if they get someone in who can put some order and a bit of discipline into the squad, they're in a great position. And now they are. Look at them. Pre-season, I think every player is bought in. They're all playing the positions, the formations, the plays that Pochettino wants them to do. And you can see they're not even half cooked yet.
What do you make of
in the kitchen today?
What do you make of Brighton this season?
I think De Zerbi, this is a real test for De Zerbi this season. There's a chance he could lose Caicedo. City were kind of sniffing around for like a Matoma or someone like that. I think he might need one more signing, maybe just someone that can help him with the goals. I think they still lacked kind of a direct route to goal. They lost Trossard last season, and I still think they've got all these elements they need. But I think we're kind of overlooking the fact that they should be building at a faster rate than they are, and they're not.
In the transfer market?
In the transfer market, yeah.
Unless, of course, they've just signed a 17-year-old Paraguayan who you'll go, that's cool, who turns out to be...
How often does that happen, bro?
For them, about twice a year. But,
sure.
But I take your points.
Yeah. And then, even then, it's like, okay, where now?
Right. And I mean, the big question on everyone's lips is, when is Evan Ferguson going to Man United for 75 million? And why is it the season after next?
I've got Manchester United playing up to third, possibly even second this season. I think everyone's going to underestimate Ten Hag. I think really the thing for me is, obviously he's improved in two really key positions for him. I think that's so key. Goalkeeper, massive. And striker in Højlund. He said it himself or something like that, right? And so there's that. Without Weghorst taking up a position in that team, and you put Højlund in there's a whole new set of movement. There's a whole new set of relationships. That's great. I think he might take some time to bed in. There's plenty of players who are bedded in around him. And Onana is already just being Onana. And that's what you pay him for, right? You pay him to do... He's like, Evel Knievel. You pay him for the attempt.
Yeah, and, he got lobbed from the halfway line.
Whatever.
It is whatever, but are Premier League teams watching?
Yeah, they are, but there's only so many times those lobs come off. There's only so many times where you get the ball back in that position, and you just remember it. And how many times per game? I mean, how many times per game is Onana going to get lobbed this season? Do you reckon someone could lob Onana twice in a game? Does it even matter if you lob him twice in a game?
You see, the thing is, on balance, probably not.
Right.
I mean, Aaron Ramsdale did a brilliant Players Tribune.
Yeah, that was really good.
And
came out just the right time, by the way. Everyone's going, is Aaron Ramsdale still blah, blah, blah? Is he still this, still that? Is Ryan number one now? Here's a Players Tribune article. Eat that.
Yeah, I mean, just on actually David Raya, both Arsenal and Chelsea appear to have two variations of a number one. And I just wonder if, I'm speaking speculatively, if the next football innovation is a move to two number ones.
I just don't know how that helps. And I get it. Like there is a clear improvement in what Arsenal want to achieve with Raya. And I think the same with Chelsea. Like they've made Kepa the number one. And I get it. I think there are some times where we've seen goalkeepers rotated. I think actually Chelsea did it with Kepa and who's the Mendy, yeah. But I don't see it being a long-term thing. Goalkeepers, again, good goalkeepers of quality. Maybe that's why they've gone in for Raya. It's like, oh, it's 30 million. That's cheap for what we want to try and achieve. And we could sell Ramsdale on for that.
At least that.
I kind of compared it to when Roy Evans was managing Liverpool and Gerard Houllier came in and they were like, they will jointly manage this team. It's like, they will jointly be goalkeeper. And, it's like, oh, the quality will push Ramsdale to another level. Raya is just stronger in the areas that Arteta is looking for. And or even the areas that the goalkeeper coach is looking for, which is Kana or Sana.
It's also very interesting that Arsenal are, compared to Liverpool, putting truly the finishing touches.
Yeah.
If you think about, we're going to upgrade on Aaron Ramsdale, who everyone thought was brilliant, because David Raya can distribute a little bit more.
Do you know what else it made me consider? Was maybe the deficiencies of the top goalkeepers that we haven't really questioned. And I think maybe actually it made me question Alisson's distribution. I think Alisson's had a lot of emphasis put on his saving ability in recent years because Liverpool's dip. And that's maybe what Liverpool need from him. I reckon we're going to have a discussion around how you grade the best goalkeepers from now, just purely based on the way they're involved in the formation.
It is very interesting because Alisson, I think, is the goalkeeper who one-on-one in the world I'd have in goal.
Oh, 100%. If you're playing Liverpool's tactics, at least defensively, there you go. I think offensively, there are only a couple of goalkeepers, and Alisson's distribution is fantastic in some moments. I also think there's other moments where you do see him I can remember a lot of games where he goes, sorry. And I guess Raya's going to have that. And maybe he doesn't say sorry because he doesn't feel that's a deficiency. Goalkeeper's very much an eye test position because in that eye test, people go, oh, look, he doesn't look confident there. It's same with Ramsdale. It's a perception and eye test thing, which only really happens in certain positions on the field.
It's absolutely true. And the other distinction about the goalkeeping position that it feels like worth mentioning is, okay, a left winger, you can bring in another equivalent left winger to compete, have them sharp. Because if someone feels like they don't have a set position, it'll make them play better,
right?
Is the idea. It's not obvious to me that logic extends to goalkeeping.
Yeah, right. Okay, that makes sense.
I think it's more like a long-term relationship where you want a level of security. You don't have to have the best day every day in order to be your best self over the long term.
Why is it that, maybe just from the outside, we don't see it this way. Maybe we isolate the goalkeepers as a position. Why is it that we don't think about the goalkeeper as part of that backline unit more? Is it just because they are still played in such an isolated way? Onana, but watching Onana in preseason, I'm like, God, that guy's high. Like in more ways than one. Like, look at him. You got to play that way to get there. Like,
and look how near the halfway line he is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right?
Silly.
Like,
yeah. I mean, the thing is about Onana or Sanchez, they do challenge this idea of what's important to the goalkeeper, and there may well come a time, and I think we've probably already got there, where keeping the ball at the net, everyone's roughly the same at, is the assumption. So now the question is, how high do you allow your defense to squeeze?
Right.
Can you beat the first press? Can you pass through the lines? And in that, there will be two types of goalkeepers produced.
Right.
The goalkeepers who are almost generated for the top game, for the top level. And then the goalkeepers who are fundamentally shot stoppers.
Let's move on then to the final element, which I wanted to discuss, which was the West Ham element. Now, I've kind of been through that, but I think Ward-Prowse and Harry Maguire signing for those guys, fascinating. Like, talk about fit of a player, right? Ward-Prowse, first of all, we were kind of discussing it pre-pod. I think in a way, you look at him and you go, you could have stayed at Southampton. You could have come probably back up with them, less of the other maybe feel like guaranteed promo guys, but maybe not. You'd then come back up and you'd be part of a beloved Southampton side. And, who knows? Maybe he's just not part of the long-term plan at Southampton and, maybe they see him as maximum market quality or market value right now. We were trying to work out the highest level he could get to in the Premier League. We said Man City might take him as like an exercise, but he's not progressing that midfield in that way. It would be like a fun little Pep experiment, like a Calvin Phillips or maybe even Foden when he first came through, where you kind of go, where does he fit in? And Pep sort of goes, oh, we love him. We have so many plans for him.
Yeah, James, he is better than Xavi.
I
love him. And Yeah, he played 12 minutes for us this year. That's how you know I love him more than I loved Busquets.
Yeah, right. And then Liverpool doesn't really fit right now. Can't really play him. Can't play in the McAllister Szoboszlai position. Can't play in the 6. He's not a 6 that we need, put it that way.
But we questioned why he didn't sign for Newcastle, or why Newcastle weren't in for him.
Or why? Yeah, right.
Because, the truth is, it's August and he's only been signed today.
Is it partly the position he plays? Like, I feel like it at the moment, teams are trying to be more compact and more central. He's not that. But City are trying to go wider, but that's why maybe we'll go. That's why City would go. We're trying to go wider. Who's the what? James Ward. Brilliant. Come on in, Mr. Prowse.
I'll say this. I think West Ham have just gone up 4 places in the table today with Maguire and Ward-Prowse.
So they're now 17th. No, okay. So the fit of Ward-Prowse is one where a lot of people basically go, David Moyes can play football, and Ward-Prowse is seen as someone who can play football, right? And West Ham will love him.
But then the joke's on them because he's been signed for a set plays.
Right. And who's on the other end of those set plays?
Harry Maguire.
Right. Harry Maguire is an inspired signing in the Premier League. Maybe not. Well, 30 million might actually be what he should have initially gone for. And I think maybe in history we'll look back and go, 80 million.
Harry Maguire.
80.
Harry Maguire
80. No.
Is West Ham plays close to an international team as anyone else in the Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
Deep lying defences, small distances. He's going to love it at West Ham.
He is.
They're going to put him next to Zuma and Diop. They're going to have Paqueta and Ward-Prowse just in front. He's never going to be more than 5 yards from a buddy.
Yeah.
Crosses are going to come in. He's going to beat his chest. The West Ham fans are going to love it. Inevitable winner against Man United. Hysterical.
Inevitable start against Manchester United, where there's multiple times in the game where he also gets tested by Manchester United's new striker or Manchester United's Anthony or whoever it is.
And comes out on top.
I think it's 50-50 of how many times he comes out on top. But Manchester United, inevitably, Anthony will go by him twice and not score. But then, for that reason...
That's the football logic I was referring to.
Yeah, right.
Of course. So I think West Ham, essentially, because they play so deep and rely on set plays, and Ward-Prowse has a little bit more about him in terms of passing than Declan Rice.
Yeah.
Different kind of player, not a direct replacement.
Yeah.
I think, so David Moyes had been beefing with the director of football because they wanted to go all FM, Brighton, and David Moyes was like, no, Scott McTominay.
Scott McTominay is a fascinating one because I guess David Moyes is still going down the route of tried and tested. I feel like I know what I'm going to get from this guy. Maybe I feel like there's a higher ceiling. I'm Scottish, he's Scottish. He's my man out on the pitch.
He also
need a new Mark Noble.
Yeah, and for Scotland, he's played centre-half in the back three.
Right.
And also goal-scoring hero against Spain and Malta.
Is it also the case that Manchester United signed Johnny Evans again? So everyone's sort of going, who can we vajazzle?
Who can we retrofit?
Who can I retrofit? Yeah. There's kind of this old Manchester United players thing to the point where I wonder if Lee Sharp might come back.
Yeah, he was on trial at Forest.
So are a couple of other United players this season. But seriously, the West Ham thing, I think you are right in the sense they've found pieces that now fit. They said they're not going to let Paqueta go at all, which is fascinating because there was lots of speculation around how well he'd fit in at City. I kind of loved that.
Paqueta to City feels like just, because there's a 1 year delay once you sign for City. So
right.
Initially what happens is you don't get it.
Yeah.
And it's like learning a GCSE language. And what the hell is a past participle? And then 18 months in, you're like, oh, Rodri's really good. I just give it to him.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then he'll give it back and I'll look really good because I'll have moved a little bit and we'll the lines will have moved. And then everyone goes, oh, look at that round the corner. But I'm good. Yeah, John Stones. John Stones is my other passing option. I've got John Stones and Rodri as my 2 passing options. Wow.
If you were Premier League fit,
yeah.
So, you went personal trainer full time, came down to the studio, and it was City at home to Leeds, like last year, Sam Allardyce's Leeds. Do you reckon you could just look absolutely fine next to Rodri playing 5-yard passes? No.
City require too much. City require a lot within there. And I think this is where we need to discuss City a little bit, or at least movement this season. There was a great video from James Alcott earlier on talking about the deeper 8s or the deployment of the deeper eight. So the Kovacic alongside Rodri, he's not an 8, but you get what I mean. It's almost like a weird deep double pivot, but they do have to be an 8.
It's strange because City are so high up the pitch.
Yeah.
That by definition they're an 8.
By pitch position, they're an 8.
By role, they're a 4.
By role, they're a 4. Maybe one's a 4, one's a 6, or there's double pivot in some way. I remember there was this obsession in Spain for a while of double pivot, kind of caused by your boy Pep Guardiola, and now they've gone 4-2-2-2, which is also weirdly how Real Madrid are trying to go, but they're trying to execute it in a completely different way. But it shows, I think, where the current state of football is, or where the thought is, and how Pep feels like he has to be ahead of this box midfield, and how he can exploit the space that's created by that box midfield, and how maybe we will need to almost expand the box midfield to become a bit wider. I wonder if we'll go from the narrow to the wide this season.
I think that's a really awesome point. Like, as the box midfield, which is a more narrow way of building up, becomes more popular, Pep's just gone, hang on, isn't all the space out wide then?
Yeah.
And essentially, like, if that's the case, and you want to play a couple of wingers, well, now you're more naturally suited to essentially deep lying players.
Yeah, and he's talking about wingers. We're not talking about inside forward wingers, which is hence why maybe letting Mahrez go is not a terrible idea, and actually trying to find someone trying to find someone else to get him is amazing. And it's also that you need to be wide at a certain point in the pitch. He's trying to be wide where everyone else is trying to be narrow, and he's trying to be narrow where everyone else is wide. Hence why at the moment, and always last season, Jack Grealish was making those inward diagonal darts to go wide where he needed to be, where the space was, and then into this like heavy traffic area that he could cause and find that space in.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is Paqueta...
I'm probably completely wrong, by the way.
No, I think that's dead on. And the thing about Paqueta is, well, they're trying to move Bernardo Silva to the right wing. They're trying to essentially say, well, Bernardo, you've been playing in this kind of central advanced 8 thing. No. You're now a wide right midfield player.
I don't mind that.
I mean, the thing that's interesting about it is it's easy as football fans to go, oh, how wonderful is X style of play?
Yeah.
But the managers who created it are thinking, Jesus, that was like stage 2.
Yeah.
But it's outdated.
Yeah.
On to expanding the box.
Totally get that. In terms of like space this season, I do think that what we can traditionally consider the 8 and 7 and 11 positions are so important. Now, what I often see a lot of people do when they talk about these areas are the rotations. So there's obviously rotations in a lot of positions right now in football in terms of like Liverpool used to put, Salah would come inside, Hendo would go outside, Trent would come up the inside of the two of them or whatever it was, right? That was a rotation. But those rotations, when you think of rotation, you think of the word rotation. So you think it turns clockwise or counterclockwise, right? Now it seems to be that people are asking people to intuitively shift rather than rotate, if that makes sense.
Right, as in they're not swapping per se.
Yeah, they're not swapping. They are shifting.
Into different areas. It is interesting because the fundamental principle is the same, which is there's 22 players on the pitch and you want to find space in a useful area. So in some ways it's a reaction to the defensive setups. And football has this lovely cyclical arms race nature about it. The WM, which is, was the formation in the 30s and 40s.
And then, quite for a long while, actually, yeah.
Came back.
Yeah.
With both City and Liverpool playing a different version.
Was it? Yeah. I mean, it was. Yeah. I mean, I think it's disingenuous, maybe. I get what you're saying. It's the shapes look WM. I feel like it's slightly disingenuous to say it was actually a WM, but it makes sense.
Football is so different, it wasn't the WM as executed. But the principle of, hey, we'll have 3 defenders, 2 midfield players, and 5 attackers contributing to the attack.
Which looks like a WM.
Came back round.
Yeah.
And I guess the thing is we're talking about wingers. Or we're talking, God forbid, about 4-4-2 for City.
Yeah, right.
Innovation often is a relative term to mean not objectively better or more advanced, but, hey, it's different to what they're doing and it will react well to it.
It's interesting because I know there's a lot of comparisons between KDB and Steven Gerrard a lot of the time, and I always come out on Gerrard's side, Liverpool fan, and I also I think he was technically one of the best players ever to grace the Premier League and probably the Champions League as well. I think KDB is very much up there, and I think those two are kind of compared in that way. There were a couple of games last season where I went, you're playing that attacking just off Torres type role that Gerrard used to play, where it looks more like a 2-3-1, but really it's more like a 4-4-1-1, and KDB was like the 1, and then it's interesting to see just different executions. And I think the more that we discuss the tactical nuances of it, and the more that we discuss the movement within those spaces, the more I think how little I actually know about football.
Yeah.
The more I'm just like, wow, we are on a weekly basis trying to read this manager's mind and go, we know what you're trying to do. And I then thought to myself, how frustrating would it be for have someone post-game go, here's some heat maps. Oh yeah, look at that. Like, do you know what I mean?
As far as Pep's concerned, Alvarez and KBD might play the same role, which is mind-blowing as an outsider.
Yeah, right. And on top of and then on top of that as well, there's so many times where I also feel, and we spoke about this on a previous podcast, it's the familiarity that a lot of the players have with this. So while some people within our roles will be coming across this for the first time or finding these things afresh, actually what's fascinating is the familiarity that a lot of these players in Pep's side have with the shapes he's asking them to take up, because they're reaching back into their locker of what's already there. What Pep is trying to do is have this adaptability amongst not only positioning, but also the plays they can do within that. And that's what I found fascinating about him versus Arsenal, was this like, oh, you think we're going to do the box? No, we're playing
4-4-2 at the Emirates.
Yeah.
Or at the Etihad rather.
Etihad, yeah.
And here's a long ball to De Bruyne.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it just shows the football fans, and I'm guilty of this as much as anyone. We like to try and think of these tactical setups as less dynamic than they are. We like to feel like we understand them. And that requires us going, heat map, he plays there, he plays there. It's very difficult to make that claim over a season or over 10 games. I mean, I guarantee you, if you watch any team, particularly the promoted sides this season, and you look at how they set up in games 1 to 3, it'll be significantly different to 8 to 10.
Wow, I like that. That's a really great way of previewing the season, actually, because I think the changes we see early on, and particularly like, if you're looking at, Klopp adapting Liverpool, or Poch trying to get Chelsea to play away, or Ange Postecoglou, I think it's going to be very interesting with him. So I really enjoy him. I think there's some technical deficiency in that. Or like, technically they're very proficient at some things, but that's mostly attacking. I feel like defensively we might sort of be going, what? I love this. Like, loads of people are saying, I love Ange Postecoglou again. I love watching Spurs again. It's such a Spurs thing to go, we're attacking. I love it. But it's whether that gets you high up the league table is, I guess, what I'm saying, and whether it's like in the modern game, whether it works.
I think because of the season Spurs have just had and the season before, it doesn't matter. It's almost as if like they've got a free hit, and as long as they play attacking football, fans will go, "Oh my god, you're allowed to play not in your own box."
Would you keep or sell Harry Kane?
Sell.
Yeah, me too.
Just on that, I want to ask you: do you think the 100 million euros,
110 now,
110 million euros for a 30-year-old with 1 year of his contract? What does that say about the state of play? That's an offer that could realistically be turned down.
I think it's really weird. First of all, because Bayern constantly tell people we don't have the money, and then they are spending that. Like, you're telling me there's not 2 other players for 55 million euros each, or 40 million euros, or someone in your league that you already like, that you feel is there? Like, it's just not, it doesn't seem efficient to me in any sense of the word. Also because, we saw Sadio Mane go there last season. We've seen a lot of players go there and kind of go, this is going to work? I don't know. It makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel weird because it doesn't feel like normal behavior.
Yeah, I think Bayern have panicked because of their season last year, and they've gone...
But they still won the league.
Oh, I know, which is such a depressing state of affairs.
And then Dortmund lost one of their talismanic players. Also, Dortmund pushed them right to the end, and Bayern were just lagging. So it's not like they'll lag again this season.
Bayern lost Lewandowski and decided, we'll still win the league. And they were just right.
Maybe there's an element of arrogance there that they need to address.
The interesting thing about Harry Kane is Bayern Munich not just saying, oh, mate, we'll send you an email in 3 months or 6 months at Christmas, give you a 25 mil signing on bonus. See you next year.
And also, it gives you another season under Ange Postecoglou to go and get close to that scoring record. So later on in your career, you could come back and play for another team and score 10 goals a season over 4 seasons and be fine. I don't know. I think Kane also, there was a historic, it wasn't a passing of the baton, it wasn't any of these things. Haaland came in and snatched the limelight. And I think Salah probably didn't like that. I think Kane probably didn't like that. I think a lot of people probably questioned that. I'm interested to see this season whether Kane even reacts to that. I think it's bizarre that he's leaving the Premier League. I think it's really weird that the relationship has been managed to this degree. It's like, because it's happening so publicly, there is something very strange about it where it feels almost performative by Kane, Levy, and everyone else, where I look at it and go, do you guys know that this looks stupid? Like, I'm not calling Levy stupid, but it looks weird.
Yeah, the aesthetics are strange.
They're not great.
Kane, I think, is as quiet as he's been because he wins either way.
Right.
He either goes to Bayern Munich or he leaves to Man United or Man City.
Right.
Or someone domestically next year for more cash.
If you're Harry Kane, I think going to the Bundesliga, going to Serie A, going to any other league just looks like you going, I can't win the Premier League. And I get it. Like, you'll go somewhere else, you'll earn a lot of money, you'll be continentally a name and these kind of things. I think that's fantastic. Alan Shearer will always have that Premier League scoring record if you go, and he'll always have the Premier League. And that sucks if you're Harry Kane, I think.
I think he can't win the Premier League. I think unless you play for City.
Or United. I think if he'd gone to United, I think you add, I said this at my end of the season, I think you add the 20 goals.
10 points.
10 points, 20 goals. More than 10 points. Because I think those 20 goals change a lot.
They're worth 15 points, 20 points.
Mm.
I mean, to get 18 points, you need to turn 6 losses into wins.
And some draws.
And some draws.
I think United dropped silly points last season. There were points where you go, if you had a striker, if you had someone to get in there, you'd have been all right.
So I have to...
Højlund.
So I have to finish up by asking, what's the biggest regret of the lot?
Regret or question mark that I then went, why did I commit so hard?
Regret.
Good question. Maybe not putting Chelsea in the top 4 and committing more to them, possibly not committing more to Manchester United, and possibly just fooling myself into thinking that Man City are just not going to come back and just absolutely razz everyone after game 10. We do forget, though. I mean, you do forget, I think City aren't, I think it's coming off the back of a treble, so how cliche is this? A lot of those players externally changed their mind and were changing their mind for a while. Bernardo Silva signed a new contract but wanted to leave for a while. Kyle Walker wanted to leave. Cancelo wanted to leave. I think what I'm wondering is whether Pep enjoys operating in a slightly uncomfortable kind of, this is awkward environment.
And whether it's necessary.
Yeah, right. Well, I think for Pep, everything he does, he makes it feel necessary. So it's not to the outside world, but it's the kind of thing where these finishing touches that feel unnecessary to us are the reason that we had to have a Premier League title.
I think the ability to go win 3 in a row is predicated on having an uncomfortable working environment.
Right.
I don't really understand how you can go after the second one. You know, the Premier League, it's a difficult thing come February, March, April. And other teams are hungry. Like Arsenal were celebrating every victory at home to Brighton, they lost heavily at home to Brighton, but the lower Premier League sides, as if they'd won the World Cup. Mm-hmm. To overrule that energy every season speaks to just everyone being insecure and anxious, and it's awesome.
We will discuss more and more about this in the coming weeks. Thanks a lot for joining me on the podcast, Jamie. I really appreciate it.
Loz, always happy to be here.
I love chatting to everyone else out there as well. This is just something we wanted to put on the channel. I have no idea if this pops up in sub boxes. I have no idea where this is meant to go. So I'm going to find out in the coming days. But I really appreciate you guys joining us, spending time with us. And we will see you on the next... I don't want to call it the Lozcast. I mean, it is the Lozcast, but it's kind of like it's a football variation of that. It's on the Lozcast feed, but it is our football podcast.
Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for joining us. We'll see you guys again soon.